This content is a work of fiction inspired by regional folklore, urban legends, cultural storytelling traditions, and anecdotal reports submitted online. While presented in a documentary narrative format for immersion and entertainment, no claims are made regarding the factual accuracy of the events described. Join the Red Sky Collective, subscribe, like, and activate notifications so you're among the first to receive our next classified case file.
The last broadcast of Pine Ridge. There are places that vanish from maps, communities that slip quietly out of the world as if they were never supposed to be here in the first place. Pine Ridge, North Dakota, is one of those names you might stumble upon buried in old weather reports, forgotten state records, or whispered in small towns late at night when people talk about storms that don't feel like storms, and lights in the sky that don't feel like anything human. What you're about to hear isn't a legend meant to entertain. It's the last voice of a town that should still be here, but isn't. Tonight, we return to December 1970. Winter had already been cruel that year across North Dakota, but Pine Ridge was used to cruel winters. The town was quiet, rural, hardworking, farmers, mechanics, teachers, families that knew each other for generations. Life moved slow. The radio station was the beating heart of the town, broadcasting weather alerts, local news, birthday announcements, church notices, and the warm voice of its late-night host, a man everyone knew simply as Walt. For Pine Ridge, the radio wasn't background noise. It was comfort. It meant nobody was alone. The storm began on a Wednesday afternoon. Snow rolled in thick, not falling gently but slamming against windows as if something was pushing it. By evening, visibility dropped to almost nothing. Wind speeds recorded in nearby towns were described as howls instead of gusts. Even in audio archives, technicians later said the wind didn't sound natural, it sounded like voices layered together. By midnight, power lines were failing, roads disappeared, emergency vehicles couldn't reach Pine Ridge anymore, and the entire area was officially classified as isolated by storm. No entry. No exit. Just white. The only thing still alive was the radio station. And so, people tuned in. No one expected what they would hear. The surviving audio recordings, what little exists, don't begin like a horror story. That makes it worse. Walt's voice comes through, steady, reassuring, a voice you'd trust on the coldest night of your life. He talks about staying warm, conserving generator fuel, checking on neighbors if possible. He laughs a little, tries to keep spirits up. He plays a record. It skips once. Then again. Then it won't stop skipping. When Walt tries to lift the needle, listeners say they heard him mutter quietly. That isn't the player. He cuts the music. And then the first call comes in. A woman's voice, terrified but trying not to sound like it. She says she's looking out her kitchen window and the snow has stopped falling straight down. It's drifting upward. The wind, she says it isn't blowing. It's pulling. Then her voice cracks. She whispers that she sees something above the tree line. Something darker than the storm, black against black, like a hole in the sky swallowing light instead of emitting it. She trails off. She starts praying. The line goes dead. Walt tries to joke, tries to calm his audience, tries to keep normalcy. But his voice betrays him, there's a tremor. He asks callers to stay rational. Stay calm. Stay inside. Then another call comes in. This one is a man. He sounds angry, not scared. He says the government has to be testing something. He says he can hear a low vibration coming from above his barn, loud enough to rattle screws from the wall, but quiet enough that the sound feels more like pressure than noise. He talks about his cows trying to break down the gate, about animals panicking, about dogs howling in synchronization like something was commanding them. Then he says something that even years later makes your skin crawl. He says there is light coming from inside the snow. Not above. Not beyond. Inside. The static deepens. The line cracks. He shouts. Something crashes in his house. Then silence. Walt breathes heavily into the microphone. You can hear it. That's when the broadcast stops sounding like radio and starts sounding like confession. He says something like, "If you're listening out there, if you're listening anywhere, tell me this isn't just us." He wasn't only speaking to nearby towns. He was speaking to the world. Or something beyond it. He keeps the channel open while the storm rages. He begs for someone to answer. Eventually, more people do. A teenage boy calls. He sounds like he's crying and trying not to. He says his parents told him to stay in the basement, but his parents aren't in the house anymore. He says he heard the front door open twice. No footsteps. Just the door. He says he can hear something like footsteps above him now, but the sound doesn't match how a person walks. It's too slow, too deliberate, like whatever is moving doesn't need to hurry. Then he says something nobody ever forgot. He says the radio isn't coming from the speaker anymore. It's coming from the ceiling. The call cuts. Listeners in surrounding towns reported hearing faint echoes through their own radios. Not feedback. Echoes. As if Pine Ridge wasn't broadcasting across distance anymore, but across layers. The storm intensified, though storm may no longer be the right word. People described the wind changing direction repeatedly without pattern. Snow spiraled not chaotically, but rhythmically, like something was turning it, organizing it. When people looked outside, what they saw were shapes in the white, silhouettes that didn't match human bodies, figures tall, thin, moving with serenity rather than violence, as though the blizzard belonged to them. And through it all, the broadcast continued. At some point, Walt stops sounding like a host and starts sounding like a witness. He speaks quietly, voice breaking. He says the power flickers non-stop but never fully goes out. He says the lights dim in waves, like breathing. He says he can see the town from the station window and there are lights in the sky, not shining down, but watching. He tells listeners he can't tell what time it is anymore. The clock on the wall is frozen at 1:17 a.m. His watch shows 4:32. The emergency generator clock shows 12:01. He laughs nervously and says he guesses time doesn't matter tonight. Then he goes quiet for a moment. Long enough that in the surviving audio, you can hear the sound of empty air. Then he whispers. It doesn't feel like the storm is keeping something out. It feels like the storm is keeping something in. The next calls are different. They aren't updates. They are goodbyes. A nurse calls from the small clinic. She sounds exhausted, trying to sound strong. She says half the beds are empty now. Not because people recovered. Because they left. Some walked out into the storm. Calmly. As if responding to a call no one else could hear. She says she tried to stop one elderly man and he looked at her and said with absolute peace in his eyes. It's not cold out there. Not anymore. Then she starts crying. She apologizes. She says there are children in the clinic whispering to people who aren't there. She says she feels something standing behind her but every time she turns, she sees nothing but frost forming slowly on the window glass in the shape of a hand. The line cuts with a soft thud, like the receiver hitting the floor. By this point, people outside Pine Ridge aren't listening to a strange radio drama. They're listening to real-time disappearance. Federal records later stated the storm reached levels considered meteorologically unclassifiable. It built its own pressure system. It defied wind mapping. Aircraft W. Inside that void, the broadcast continues. Near the end, Walt stops taking calls. Or maybe there are no more callers left to take. His voice is tired, slow. He apologizes to the people listening. He apologizes to anyone who may find the tape. He apologizes because he says he doesn't think Pine Ridge is supposed to leave anything behind. He begins describing the sound outside. Not wind. Not thunder. A hum. A deep, resonant tone that vibrates the bones of the building. He says it feels like the town is being unstitched. Like reality there is loosening. He says things in the room don't cast shadows consistently anymore. Sometimes they have to. Sometimes none. Sometimes the shadow lags behind, a fraction of a second slower. He laughs softly. It's not a happy sound. Then he says something that chills everyone who's ever heard it. If anyone ever digs where this town used to be, don't. He says he can see figures moving outside. They aren't rushing. They aren't hunting. They are simply collecting. People leaving their homes and walking toward the same point. Not forced. Not screaming. Just guided. Like gravity had chosen a new direction. He says he wants to go too. He doesn't understand why. He sobs because it feels beautiful. And then he stops talking. For a moment, all that remains is wind and that impossible hum. Then one final sentence, whispered, barely audible. We were not alone tonight. And we were not supposed to survive this. The broadcast ends. Silence. When rescue crews finally reached Pine Ridge days later, the snow had settled. The storm vanished as unnaturally as it began. Roads cleared easily, as if the storm had only existed while it needed to. They expected devastation, collapsed roofs, bodies frozen in streets. They found nothing. No survivors. No people. No animals. No bodies. No footprints. Every house stood untouched. Lights off. Meals left unfinished. Doors unlocked but not forced. Beds unmade. Breakfast halfway prepared. Life paused, then erased. The station was found still powered by a nearly drained emergency generator. The recording equipment was intact. The broadcast tape existed, but portions were warped, blank, or filled with layered static that audio engineers said behaved intelligently, like the noise refused to be separated into normal waveforms. To this day, some parts of the tape simply refuse to play. Government reports concluded extreme weather event and mass evacuation attempt. But evacuation leaves tracks. Evacuation leaves evidence. Evacuation leaves at least one person who saw something. Pine Ridge left nothing. The town was legally dissolved within the following year. People stopped asking questions. And the world moved on. But late at night, when storms gather over North Dakota, radio enthusiasts sometimes claim to pick up a faint signal on old analog receivers. A frequency that shouldn't exist. A broadcast that shouldn't be transmitting. A tired voice. A storm in the background. A final message looping through the dark. If you're listening, don't let them see you. Maybe it's interference. Maybe it's hoax. Maybe it's an echo of a town that never got to say goodbye. Or maybe Pine Ridge isn't gone. Maybe it's just somewhere else now. And maybe sometimes, it tries to reach back. And tonight, if your room grows a little colder, if the air feels just a little heavier, if for 1 second you feel like you're being watched from above instead of around you, don't go to the window. Because Pine Ridge learned something the hard way in December 1970. Some storms aren't weather. Some rescue will never come. And some disappearances aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be repeated. Sleep well. If you can.